Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. This is Imam Abdullah Oduro with the Islamic Center of Coppell. And mashallah, we have an illustrious guest with us now. He's well known in the community and here in Dallas. And mashallah, he's still active even within the times that are going on now with the coronavirus. And subhanAllah, it's imperative that someone like himself, mashallah, is active in these times. And we will find out in a couple of moments why. We have brother Usman Mughni. He's with Peaceful You, his own company that deals with family therapy. He's an LMFT, and mashallah, he's been very active. You've seen him in Valley Ranch on the wonderful Women Wednesdays with Sheikh Yasser Barjas, the Valley Ranch Master. They've been doing that for a while, for a number of years now. And I've had the opportunity to get some of his time to sit with us and to talk about these important matters. As many of us know now, many of us are home for long periods of time, if not the whole day, with our family members. For some of us, that is a ni'mah, a blessing. And for some of us, that is a huge, huge challenge and test. And, you know, to be honest with ourselves, there may be some family members that we don't get along with. There may be some family members that we've never even entertained the opportunity to see if that can happen, i.e. getting along with each other. So now both of those things are going to come to the forefront to where you're going to have to face the person that you're with, or, you know, you're facing that person on a daily basis. And the more that there's contact, the more that there's communication, it just seems to bring more separation, especially if it's the mother and the father. When the children see that, it definitely has a rippling effect on them. But what we want to speak with Brother Usman about is primarily the aspect of the family. We will be having a series of talks and interviews with Brother Usman, and it will be every concurring Saturday. So this is our first one. It will be every other Saturday after that, inshallah ta'ala. Please stay tuned on our Facebook, on ICC, on our Facebook page. And this interview will be recorded, inshallah. Please spread for people to see and to benefit from. Today, what we're going to touch on, inshallah ta'ala, is the aspect of the family. As you see within the title, peace, you know, harmony, salam, spreading that peace amongst one another, you know, having the peace within oneself and to further spread it. We're going to be a little general today, and the concurring weeks, he'll be a little more specific. So what is the relationship with the mother in the family, her responsibilities, the father in the family, his responsibilities, the children and their responsibilities. So today we're going to just be really general as a family. What is the responsibility, or what are some considerations that families should have, being that they are together in the, you know, in the home with the coronavirus? So what I want to do is start off by asking Brother Usman what his experience in general with Muslim communities and families in general, just starting off with some general features and forms of advice that he's seen that, just if we were to stop and think about it, it would be very, very helpful, just in general, before we get into the specific.
Sure.
So, okay. Would you for your time, inshallah?
Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. As Sheikh Adora kindly introduced, my name is Usman Mughni. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. So a lot of my work centers around the family, how we can help families change, what causes change, and how we can motivate people to change. Even when I'm seeing individuals, you can't separate the individual from the family, whether that's previous family trauma or current family trauma. So even when I'm working with somebody with anxiety or depression or OCD or another type of maybe mental health diagnosis or even addiction, there is an aspect of the family relations which can either help support that person or make things worse, right? And so, Sheikh, I mean, you had mentioned that for some people, this time is a blessing, right? This isolation is a blessing, and for other people, it can be a trial. And I think that for a lot of us, it can be both. Some days are going to feel like a blessing, and some days are going to feel like a trial, right?
Interesting.
So, when we talk about family in general, one of the things we say in family therapy is that a good litmus test for the psychological health and well being of a family is their ability to cope with change. Their ability to
Okay.
cope with change, right? So, if we look at our lives as individuals and families in general, we're going through constant change. Children are born, they grow up, they go through elementary school, they go through high school, they get married, then they have kids. And so each of these phases in life requires an adjustment, requires some type of adaptation by the family. Healthy
Hmm.
families are able to adapt quicker and be more flexible in their adaptation, while unhealthy families struggle with it. So that's
Interesting.
just looking at it from a family systems perspective. Now, within change, right, there's predictable change and there's unforeseeable change. Predictable change would be the, graduation, a child moving out, right, marriage,
Mm.
um,
Okay.
the birth of a child. Then there's unforeseen change, which would be things like getting laid off, a disease maybe, a sudden death of a family member. And in this instant, COVID would definitely fall under the unforeseen, unpredictable change, right? Because this is something, alhamdulillah, I'm 36 now. I've never experienced anything like this in my life. I think most of us could say the
Okay.
same. And we would never be able to predict that, the situation would be such that the massages are closed down, where, in kind of forced isolation. So we really have to take a step back and say, well, how are we as a family doing with coping with this change?
Mm, mm, mm. So you mentioned healthy families can adopt quicker,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you did. If you see me looking down, really community. I'm speaking to the community, and it's indirectly speaking to Brother Usman. I'm writing this stuff because, Subhanallah, as he probably knows, as he knows, I mean, I love this aspect of humanities. I think it's very, very important. We as Muslims, we highly neglect it, and I'm not going to go further. He's going to expound upon it, so I can just learn. I highly implore all of you all, mashallah, to write this down. To what he's mentioning, the categorizations that he's mentioning is something that is from extensive study and experience that, hours, forget hours, years of experience that he has to come with this. Now, you mentioned healthy families adapt quicker. Okay. What primary characteristics can one look at to not to say, yeah, we're a healthy family, no problem, but to say, okay, this is something I need to work on. Or, okay, alhamdulillah, we've been maintaining this pre-COVID. What
Right.
are some of the things that, the habits that a healthy family takes on?
Okay. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Flexibility and
Okay.
communication, right? Because with this with this change, roles are being redefined, right? Uh,
Okay.
even me, I'm a single dad, and now my role is much more. I was very active with my child. I'm even much more active now, and I'm very, very appreciative of all of the teachers out there
Mm.
for all that they do, because now I've had to take on a new role, which is being a teacher, being even that much
Oh,
more, even being that much more cognizant of the syllabus and uh,
yeah.
right, like I've never homeschooled, I've never been homeschooled, so I have to adapt to that. Can I adapt my schedule to that, right? So parents have to do this, right? How flexible are they with that? Um, Fathers might have to take on certain roles that they didn't before. Mothers might have to take on certain roles that they didn't. Older children might have to take on roles that they didn't. And so,
Mm, mm. That's
how is
very,
that being communicated? How are those new roles, or taking on those new roles, being accepted? How are they being requested?
yeah.
So that's what I mean by flexibility and communication.
So flexibility, okay. So okay, and that's very interesting. You mentioned school. People will say, yes, my children don't have school, but subhanallah, I guess with that reality, whether we like it or not, our kids aren't going to school. So,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, it's homeschooling, and people think homeschooling is just the curriculum is given to you by a homeschooling program,
Right.
but not really. It's following up, as you mentioned.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
all of
Yeah.
us are familiar with Schoology. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? These apps that we have to follow, but they're there. But if we don't follow up, next thing you know, your kid has a failing grade, and you're turning to your child. Well, how is this? Well, there was a mechanism for you to follow along. You know,
Right.
I've
Right.
fallen victim to this. I've
Yeah.
been, shoot out for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's not easy. But I think those two things you mentioned, subhanAllah, I would like for you to kind of expound on each one of them. So you mentioned flexibility, right?
Right.
And you gave an example with just school. That's just one. School is one, extracurricular activities are another. So within school, for example, what's a good example of someone being flexible? Let's say the father, of someone being flexible as opposed to being rigid and not being flexible from the aspect of school for the father, right? The father's at home, he has to
Right.
work from home, and the next room is his child. And, so what's a
Yeah,
good example?
right, right. So let's suppose, for example, that, historically, one parent took on the responsibility entirely of the child's education, right? The
Okay.
situation has changed now. So flexibility would mean that, fine, even though normally we've been used to this way, right? I might have to take on some more responsibility, right? And it can go both ways. It's not just that all parents have to hunker down and just be like on top of their kids' education. There might be parents out there which go overboard and causes them anxiety. So maybe this is a time for them to actually be flexible with themselves and kind of back off a little bit and let go and trust that their child will be able to do homework, right? Because if they're not flexible, let's suppose that there's a certain level of rigidity in parenting when it comes to school, right?
Yeah.
So the child goes to school from what, like 8 to 3, comes home, and then the parent is on top of them, like, did you do your homework? Did you do this? How'd you do on that? Right? You
Yep.
can't keep that up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week now, because the child doesn't have a break to go to school from that, right? So if you're constantly nagging and like, can you be flexible to kind of take a step back and say, okay, it's fine. There are certain things I can let go of. If my child was supposed to memorize X amount of on, today, and he didn't complete his lesson entirely, that's okay. That's fine. Can I be a little bit more understanding and flexible of that? That, like, it's an adjustment for me. It's an adjustment for them as well. I can't expect my child to be as disciplined outside of a school environment, especially if he has no exposure to homeschooling ever again, right? And or ever before. It's a change for them as well. Can I be accommodating to that and understanding of that? If I'm a very type A personality and I get
Yep.
anxious when things are not being done a certain way, well, in this current climate, things are changing every day. Are you
Mm,
going to be able to let go of that anxiety? That's
subhanAllah.
flexibility there. If that makes sense. So it works multiple ways. Yeah.
No, that's very important. Jazakallah khair, because just like you said, 3:36, as soon as they get off the bus, it's your food is already ready on the table, but right after that, you're doing your homework.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, you are not touching a video game console.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's 8:06 when you wake up.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking on Schoology, and how long is that going to be? You know, um, and a parent having to adjust with that. So, would you say a good way of being flexible for a parent is kind of scheduling downtime, like fun time, or what?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Because even in school, believe me, the kids are not studying 24/7, right? They
Mm,
have socialization, they talk with their friends, they have lunchtime. They, like, for the younger kids, they have recess, right? So
mm,
you have to incorporate that. You have to incorporate that downtime, and not just that. This is especially for the extremely anxious parents. There is research out there which shows that boredom can be good for kids. You don't
Whoa,
have
whoa,
to.
okay, 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 okay.
Yeah, yeah,
This
boredom
is
can be good for
great.
kids. Yes,
Okay, yes, okay. Boredom is good for kids.
it, it,
Wow.
it, it can be. Think about when you and I were growing up, right? There's not
Yeah.
constant stimulus, right?
Mm,
Right. There were times where, like, yeah, it's raining outside, you can't go play basketball. At least when I was growing up, there's only cartoons on for a certain amount of time. They're not there like 24/7. If
yeah.
you had a TV, there's no internet, so yeah, you're just yeah, you'll sit there, you'll be bored, and that's okay. that's fine. We don't need to constantly be stimulated. But
Mhm.
our anxieties like make us feel like we have to constantly entertain or educate our kids, and then the kids also get this message that I have to constantly be, you know, stimulated, and then you end up with this like cultural like ADHD that we have, you know, or we're
Okay, no,
just
okay.
constantly
Now,
needing.
now, mashallah, man. This is okay. So you said that boredom is a good thing. I don't mean to say boredom is a good thing, but yes,
It's okay for
psych,
kids to be bored
it's okay. It's okay for kids
if
to be
they're
bored.
sitting there just
Right.
doing nothing, staring out a window for it's okay. You're not a bad parent for that. That's all right. Yeah, yeah.
No, that's very, very good because I have a youth group that I work with, and subhanAllah, I had them put their, their iconic, their thumbs up. I said, "How many of you are bored? Because how's everything?" And it's just boring, man. It's just boring. I think it's two things that you mentioned one of them, and one of them is indirectly mentioned. You said that if your children are bored, it doesn't mean that you're a bad parent, because what will happen sometimes is that you'll see the parents feeling that they have to entertain them at
Exactly.
all times. As soon as
Right.
their child says that they're bored, it's like, okay, you as a parent, okay, they're going down the wrong road. Or boredom will lead them to something haram,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And in the same token, it's a message to the children that look, being bored is not a bad thing at all times, right? So I think
Hmm.
that's huge that you mentioned that, mashallah. You mentioned ADHD too.
Oh yeah,
Give
yeah.
it
No,
to me.
I was using that in the loose sense, like this idea that we need constant stimulation at all times. You know.
Right.
Right, right. I actually I'm trying to put forth a challenge during this Ramadan because it's going to be a very unique Ramadan. And as far as we know, and I mean, unless you've heard otherwise, but from some of the physicians that I've been speaking to and so on, that it
Sure.
seems like this is going to carry over to Ramadan. So it'll be a very unique Ramadan. And what I'm actually, this is kind of a tangent, but what I'm going to try and do myself, and I'm encouraging others, is really to try and either completely stop use of this thing, switch to a basic phone. I mean, unless of course your job or something absolutely requires it. Get a I actually did this myself. Like whenever I go on social media, technology fasts, I'll get like an old school alarm clock and just
Like it.
and yeah, like I would challenge people to really try that this Ramadan. I know it's going to be difficult, and you might even find yourself tossing and turning for a bit. Like so for me, um, I have the habit of watching something before going to sleep, right?
Yes.
Or just browsing Facebook, something. I think a lot of us do. And what I didn't realize, I thought it was just like, okay, I'm just winding down. But what I didn't realize is that my brain was starting to make an association with, unless I do this, I can't go to sleep, you know?
SubhanAllah.
And so when I cut it off, when I cut off using the phone, and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to get back into reading. I like to trick myself into thinking I'm an avid reader, but um, I I was tossing and turning, like no kidding, for like the first few days. It was almost like withdrawal.
Withdrawal.
Yeah,
Withdrawal.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I had difficulty sleeping, and if we're going through this as adults, like believe me, our kids which grew up on this technology, uh, I don't think it's healthy that like you
Mm.
take away a phone for a few hours from a kid and they throw a tantrum. What does that tell you? I mean, that's addiction, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So I
No,
challenge us
that,
as parents first and foremost to be able to set that example,
yeah.
inshallah, and then yeah, right.
No, that's another thing. Again, subhanAllah, um, I guess you talk about this later when you talk about advice for mothers in particular, and fathers, but
Mm-hmm.
more so with the mothers when it comes to their children, 4, 5, 6, 7, and electronic devices,
Mm-hmm.
right? The tantrum to quiet to make sure that they stay quiet, to ensure that they're quiet. If you took the phone or the controller from them and they're crying, oh, you want them to be quiet, you give it back to them,
Right, right.
and that's
It's a
what
learned
keeps them quiet.
behavior. Yeah. No.
It's a learned behavior, right? So
Mm-hmm.
accept the tantrums, I guess, not every now and then, and let it just.
Sometimes, yeah, it's okay. Again, if your child is crying, right, it doesn't make you a bad parent. It
Excellent.
doesn't, and kids will throw tantrums, and that's, you know, I
We
mean,
do.
you gave them something addictive, so like they're gonna react. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And that's kind of what the next point I wanted to kind of talk about. So we mentioned, the flexibility, and being able to adjust adequately,
Hmm.
which will require some self-reflection, from the parent, and looking
Right.
at always what they want, and then taking the child into consideration in their reality.
Right.
right? Now you mentioned, and the second thing you mentioned was communication.
Right.
How what are some guidelines for that when it comes to communication with the children? Like each parent's trying to communicate to them that there's limited time for this. Okay, we're changing the schedule. Let's pray
Right.
together as a family. Is it immediate? Is make a schedule and say we're doing this, or is it, testing the waters and seeing how that goes? Or what would you advise in regards to communication?
Okay, okay, great question. Okay, so first, let's take a step back. When it comes to communicating to the kids, right? Uh, uh, whether it's setting up time to listen to their needs or enforcing certain rules, one of the challenges that we're going to see now is that when both parents are home, who does the disciplining, right?
Okay.
And so this is kind of what's gonna need to happen is there's a term that Chef, since you do mashallah a lot of reading and research, there's a guy named Salvador Minuchin, Dr. Minuchin. He's one of the founders, like in the 50s of systems theory and family therapy. And he really looks at the family unit as a system, right? Where there's a hierarchy, there's mother and father, there's kids, how much influence does one parent have over another, how much influence does one member have over another. And so he has this term called unbalancing, right? So there's going to
Okay.
have to be a little bit of a unbalancing, like a balancing act between parents. So what I mean by that is, let's suppose historically the mom was the disciplinarian and the dad was just kind of the cool dad, right?
Sure.
Now the dad is at home as well. The kids are going to run to the dad and say, hey, mom told us like that we can't use technology, come on, can we use it, right? So now the dad is going to have to be the disciplinarian, and maybe the mom is going to have to be the one which is a little bit more lenient. Now when I say flexibility and communication, that would mean a few things. That would mean, a, that the mom would trust that the dad is allowed to, if the parents can agree on the rule, right?
Mm, mm.
Can they agree that each one can have maybe a unique way of implementing the rule? The dad might have a different, rapport with the
Interesting.
children. He might have a different
Interesting.
style of communication. So if the rule is, hey, we're going to take an hour break from all technology, right? And, the mom is fed up and saying, why do I always have to be the bad guy? Why can't the dad enforce this? Then let the dad do it in his way. As long as you guys agree on the terms, right? Because if you say that, no, you have to speak to the kids this way, you have to yell at them, you have to do whatever I'm doing, that's being inflexible. But if you say, look, we agree on the
Mm,
rules, but I'm going to trust based on your personality, based on your rapport with the kids, that you're going to do it your way, right? That's the unbalancing act that we're doing, and that's where you're giving the one parent, which maybe wasn't the disciplinarian, the power, the autonomy to be able to be the disciplinarian, and that frees you up to be kind of more the chilled, fun parent, right? Now,
yeah.
what you might be doing in this scenario is breaking a cycle that's been there for years, and the kids know that cycle. The kids know that one parent's strict, the other's not, right? And so now you're gonna have to kind of really like, wow, wait a minute, Dad just got upset with us.
You
Dad said
betrayed
no.
us.
Yeah, you betrayed
Yeah.
us, right? Yeah. But again, let dad, or if it's the other way around, like whichever parent, it might be
Yeah,
mom,
sure.
right? Let them
Definitely.
do it on their terms with what they're comfortable with. Because I see that a
Mm,
lot. It's like, okay, I want them to step up and play this role, but I want them to step up and play this role according to the
right.
way I do it, my way. Yeah.
So would you, because that's huge. I mean, sometimes, the mother is encountering a disciplinary act from the father that she doesn't like the way he's doing it, right?
Right.
Um, for instance, he may make a deal with them to stop electronics at 1 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Right.
Or they can only have electronic video games from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Right.
But the mom is like, look, don't make a deal with them. I don't ever make deals with them. It makes it feel like they have, some autonomy in this situation. Is
Right.
it to say, okay, the fact that we all agree that they shouldn't have electronics at an allocated time is what we should be concerned about? The way that I give it to them is my way. Would that be a good example?
Right. I mean, again, as
Principle?
long as the end result is there, right?
Yeah.
And again, like, if let's suppose in this scenario the mom feels that, um, okay, the dad's approach is not the best, right?
Mm,
Give constructive criticism, right? This is a new role that he's playing, and maybe it's a new role that you're playing, letting go of that authority or letting go of that control, right?
Yep.
So if you do have suggestions, and that's where the communication aspect comes in, come at it from like a place of understanding, right? Look at where the person is coming from. Like for a parent which has never had to enforce those rules, right?
Yep.
Um, there's going to be backlash. It's going to be a lot more difficult. It'll come more natural to
Uh-huh.
another parent, right? So be patient
Yep.
with that. So you can't just say that. Well, when I say it, they listen to me, right? Well, yeah, that
Yes.
pattern has been established.
Right. Very, very, that's so, subhanAllah, that's so true. I hear that a lot. So firstly, would you advise the parents, because sometimes this will come out in front of the kids, right? Their
Yeah,
disagreement,
right.
right? Would you advise the parents to sit down formally to say we need to talk about how we're going to or what we're going to? Would you advise that
Oh,
in the beginning?
absolutely, and that like the parents have to be a united front. That's at the end of the day. The parents have to be a united front, and these are conversations that need to take place without the children, right? Yes, as they're teenagers and get older, there's can be some type of collaboration for rules, right? But a 6-year-old shouldn't get to pick their bedtime, right? Yeah, that this should be something that should be communicated not in front of the kids. And then
Not
it's
in
up to
front.
the parents to follow that game plan. Now, even within that communication, right? We might be dealing with a husband and wife which don't know how to communicate in their marriage, and now all of a sudden they're tackling like coming up with like a large plan of like, you know,
Exactly. Okay.
right?
Okay.
So that's again where and we'll talk in future
Sure.
sessions about dealing with disagreements and the best way to communicate when you're upset, or the best way to communicate a concern that you have where your partner is able to hear it, you know, how
Mhm.
to feel understood. And these are things which a lot of couples are now really going to have to reevaluate. Couples which maybe worked crazy hours, never spoke to each other, like you and I were talking last time
Yep.
about this, like maybe like would go straight from work to the masjid, you know as also a means of escape from the household. you know
Right.
Now
Right.
you're forced to talk to each other. So you might have to change a lot about your approach, your personality. If you're a little bit harsh, if you're quiet, if you don't open up as much, are you willing to step out of that comfort zone in order to build that communication, in order to bridge that gap? So
Support. You touched on that. Um, Supporting the spouse's decision
mhm,
in front of the kids, even though you disagree with the way. And I think you mentioned that earlier, right? We have our own
right,
way. Um, how important is support of each other? Like you mentioned also, the husband may not be involved. And this is what's more common, not to say that it's the standard, because the husband may be, not that involved with the kids at a certain level as
mhm,
much as the mom is. And this depends, the age of the kids and things of that nature,
right,
maybe even the gender, right?
mhm,
Um, you know, and the father all of a sudden is bringing forth new rules and he doesn't talk to the family, and the wife kind of feels like, you know you should have talked to me first before telling them this,
right, right.
and now they're seeming confused and it makes it look like we're not united, or it just makes it look like the bad situation that we have, oh, it's about to get worse.
It's about to get worse. The kids will be more prone to complaining to mom. Mom might be more prone in those situations to side with the kids out of frustration that dad didn't involve her in the decision making.
Right,
And so
right, right.
now you have this situation created, right?
So would you, I mean, in that case, if it's something that mom doesn't agree with and the kids know mom doesn't agree with it, is it best for them to just, if is it best for her or him to just support their decision and then make sure that they speak to their spouse later about what
Oh
took
yeah.
place?
Like yeah, like if a decision is made on the spot the other spouse didn't know about, absolutely you don't have to talk about it in front of the kids afterwards. Even if you change the rule, right? Like
Yep.
you could start off with saying, look, your mom and I, or your dad and I had this talk, and we decided this and this was more fair. That's fine. You're still showing a united front there. But yeah,
Right.
definitely don't argue, don't oppose each other in front of the kids. And don't take it a step further and insult each other, constantly intervene to each other in front of the kids. Yeah, yeah. But by the way, just because I think we only have like another minute or so left before we take questions. I think yeah. I just keep getting a message saying um, something. 15 seconds.
15.
Oh,
No,
15
that's just
seconds.
time.
Yeah, but like I will say just again, and as we're talking about this dynamic, and again, like anybody which is interested in psychology and learning this, it's called structural family therapy. Salvador Minuchin, Munchin, I think. Structural
Okay.
family therapy, and it really talks about this, about roles in family and how we can kind of work to change and change certain dynamics, right? So just another example, and we can get into this like much later, but like let's suppose that husband and wife are having problems, right? And
Mhm.
one of the children, or one of the children is used as the family therapist, as I see a lot, unfortunately,
Really?
where yeah, oh yeah, where the mom or the dad just goes and vents and says like, your father's so unfair and so on, and then the child carries that burden, right? And the child had that piece while they were at school not to have to hear about this. Now they might be hearing about it 24/7, right? So now that parent, which may be falling into that, is going to have to take a step back and say, okay, I'm going to let my son or my daughter retire from being family therapist of the family, and I'm going to say Bismillah and talk directly to my spouse.
Wow.
Tough, but that might be the change, and there might be a blessing in us being isolated, in that if that change happens, then you've saved a whole, because this carries on from generation to generation, this burden that we put on our children, and you could have just reversed all of that with that one decision of saying, you know what, I'm gonna say Bismillah and talk directly to the parent instead of going through the kid.
MashaAllah, this is a wealth of information. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, so from what I'm understanding, I mean, just generally talking about today, just some general guidelines for families with this immediate change is to recognize that change and to um, try their best to adjust. And
Right.
some key characteristics of
Be
adjusting.
open to adjusting. Be
Be
open to the
open to
idea. Just be humble enough to say, okay, if I'm used to doing certain things, one way, the world has changed. It really has. So
it.
will I be able to change with it? Yeah,
Right. And that changing takes a process, right? It's a
absolutely,
process. But
absolutely.
the two things to consider when within that process is to be flexible and to communicate. That's
Yes,
what I'm kind of understanding. Okay.
right, absolutely, absolutely.
No, mashallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. It's a wealth of
Amen.
information. I have a
And take
paper
Zalik
full
as well.
full
Yeah,
writing. Mashallah. It's excellent. And I think each one of these demographics that we talked about, each one of these, you know, characters within the family, he's going to expound upon within the coming weeks, inshallah ta'ala. I mean, we
inshallah.
talked about a number of things, I mean, we didn't even talk about, to where, subhanAllah, the spouses, like we kind of mentioned it, where one wants to leave the house, domestic abuse and how a woman that's being domestically abused,
Right.
she's used to leaving the house. Now, what are some guidelines for her? So, inshallah, I hope we'll expound upon that in the future, bidnillah ta'ala.
Inshallah.
But
Absolutely.
if there are any questions, if anyone has any questions, please ask your questions now, inshallah. I don't see that there's any uh, questions as of yet, inshallah. Well, while the questions are, inshallah, coming, how long have you been doing family therapy?
So now I've been doing therapy, so 7.5 years, about
Seven and
almost 8 years.
a half.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All in
Right.
Dallas?
No, 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 no. So I'm from Chicago. So I,
Okay.
I, I did my undergrad in Maryland, and then I did grad school out in Chicago. So I worked at a few different hospitals, and then I started a private practice out there. And then Sheikh Yasser, actually, he came for an Al-Maghrib class several years ago and was just telling me how wonderful the Dallas community is. And so then I moved down here in 2014. Alhamdulillah, it
MashaAllah.
was a good decision. I love the community. I'm very, very happy with the decision. It's a great place to raise kids.
MashaAllah. Yeah, alhamdulillah. And mashallah, I mean, when I met you and listening to your lectures, mashallah, just as it was now, very fruitful and very informative. I mean, and it's based off of knowledge, and that's what I really take into
Barakallah feek.
high consideration. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you.
Allahumma
for the
ameen.
work.
You as well. Okay. It looks like so we're taking questions from Facebook.
Yeah, 20 more seconds for comments and questions. I guess there's no questions as of yet. Mashallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Mashallah. Alhamdulillah.
Everyone is happy and perfect. There are no issues at all. Yeah, yeah. I just out of curiosity, like, have you dealt with like people calling in about domestic violence cases and
Yes, I
yeah,
have dealt with that. It's rare that I've dealt with that. It's not a commonplace,
okay,
alhamdulillah. But I have dealt with that, yes, where there's been some,
right,
yeah.
right. So you're familiar with like Texas Women's Foundation and some of these resources
Yes,
that are out
yes,
there. Yeah, yeah. So because I've read some posts and heard from some people which you know. Sometimes we'll get the message to kind of downplay this or brush it off or say, for sabrun jamil and,
right,
not when it comes to this. Not when it comes to
exactly.
this.
Thank
I've,
you.
I've, I've had situations where one partner will like dislocated the other partner's jaw. I've had like, Yasser Fazaga was talking about a case where like a husband pushed a wife down the stairs and, she, uh, I think she became like completely paralyzed. And so, these are the type of things where and Sheikh, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Islam, we have a zero tolerance policy on this
Zero,
because
probably. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So yeah,
I mean, that could
that's
be one of the worst things you tell them,
right. Absolutely. And I think that this is sometimes my concern of general advice. I've given lectures and I always give this disclaimer that please do not conflate general advice with specific advice, right? If I'm telling
right,
somebody, hey, if your partner's upset and you need to walk away, and if you don't walk away, it's going to make the situation worse. Well, I'm not saying that if you walk away and he hits you, that it's your fault,
right,
right? But somebody might hear that as general advice, and I'm talking about something completely different and take it as
right,
that, right? When we say that shaitan is elated when a couple divorces, right? If your partner's cheating on you, or there's physical or emotional abuse, or it makes you, further away from your religion, divorce is not a bad thing, then, right? So each
right.
situation is specific, each situation is different, and so like even in the future we're gonna have, in future sessions I'm going to be talking about different communication skills and compromise and so on. Well, there are certain things that even in therapy we don't compromise on. So for example, domestic abuse, uh, marriage therapy is contraindicated. As a licensed therapist, you're not supposed to take the couple together in a room if there's any type of abuse. You can't see them together.
Mm,
It's completely contraindicated because there's that element of fear. It's not uh,
right.
so yeah, it's just when I'm talking about compromise, domestic violence, infidelity, these type of things, these are not things that you know I wouldn't say that there's like a middle ground below where like if he hits you once in a while it's okay versus or if he cheats or she cheats once in a while it's okay. No, these are one of my professors, Dr. Brent Atkinson, he has this whole form of like marriage therapy where he talks about compromise and flexibility, but then he says there are certain things which just absolutely are you don't there's no conversation. It just stops there when it comes to infidelity, abuse, these type of things, right? So I do want
Right.
to make that clear as we talk about flexibility and communication and all of that. That there
Excellent.
are
Yeah.
certain places where you have to draw the line. Yeah.
Right. Right. No, 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 no. That's Jazakallah khair for that.
Mhm.
Last note. I that's exactly, Islamically, from speaking from an Islamic
Right.
perspective, right? There's zero tolerance for that.
Right, right, right. And I heard I don't I'm sorry to cut you off. I heard that like unfortunately the rate of domestic violence has increased because of
That advice,
because of this. What is that?
because of
No, no,
that
not because
advice.
of that advice. Because of this whole coronavirus and like having to stay at home and
Oh,
yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah.
That's yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately,
Subhanallah.
like the police are getting more domestic violence calls and yeah,
Right, right, right. Subhanallah. Like you mentioned, that adjustment and trying best to, to gradually adjust to that process. Yeah, subhanallah. May Allah make it easy on all of us and our families and our children and the ones that are indirectly affected by this, because there's going to have to be some traumatic elements here when
right,
this is over. But,
right.
you know, I'm doing that we come together and do the best that we can for the advice and for the help. I think that's what's important. And it's an obligation upon each and every one of us. So
Right,
Allah
right,
subhanahu
right.
wa ta'ala reward you for trying your
Barakallah
best to
fiik.
fulfill that, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Uh,
And may Allah make us stronger through this test, and may Allah make us closer to him and to each other through this test, right?
Ameen, 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 ameen. Well, jazakallah khair for your time, brother Usman, inshallah. And we will see you all next week, 4:30 bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Please, this interview will be recorded, so please spread this interview, mashallah, and share it with your friends so we can benefit on Saturdays bi'idhnillah to let this be a catalyst for change in our homes, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you.
Walaikum
Jazakallah
salam.
khair.